It began with a warning whispered through every ship and station along the border of the Crimson Expanse. Never cross into her territory. Those who did vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, no answers. The Valari Empire called it sacred space, and within it ruled their most feared commander, Soraya of the Silver Flame. Her name alone carried a kind of quiet dread, the kind that made even warlords lower their voices. But humans were new to this corner of the galaxy, and curiosity had always been their greatest weakness, or perhaps their greatest strength. Captain Elias Reeve of the Terran Frontier Corps had heard the warnings, but he didn't believe in legends. He believed in answers. So when his scout vessel detected a strange energy pulse deep within the expanse, one that matched no known technology, he made a decision that would change the course of humanity's place among the stars. He ordered his ship to cross the border. The crew protested, voices heavy with unease, but Elias only said one thing: history doesn't remember the ones who stayed behind. They entered the expanse under a sea of blood-red nebulae, unaware that something ancient and sentient was already watching them. First, it was quiet. The stars looked distorted, stretched by the gravity wells of unseen forces. The sensors flickered as if the space around them was breathing. Then, without warning, every system on the ship went dark. The lights, the engines, even the air recyclers, all silent. A single voice echoed through the comms, smooth and steady. A voice that was undeniably female but not human. "You have crossed the line. Identify yourself." Elias's heart pounded. "This is Captain Elias Reeve of the Terran Federation. We come in peace." There was a pause. Then the voice replied, "Peace is not a language we speak here." Before anyone could react, a beam of pale light enveloped their ship. When the light faded, Elias found himself standing on the bridge of a vessel unlike anything he had ever seen. Metallic walls that flowed like liquid, air that shimmered with heat, and before him stood the legend herself, Commander Soraya. Her eyes were molten gold, her hair a river of silver strands that caught the light like liquid glass. She looked at him not with hatred, but with something worse, disappointment. "Human," she said, as if tasting the word. "You've brought your species into a graveyard." Elias was defiant, even as his crew was taken into custody. "We only wanted to understand what lies beyond the border," he said. "Your people call it forbidden. We call it curiosity." Her gaze hardened. "Curiosity," she said slowly, "is how civilizations die." Yet as her soldiers moved to escort him away, she lifted a hand. "Wait." Her tone softened, though her expression didn't. "You should not be alive right now. My fleet should have reduced your ship to dust the moment you crossed the line. And yet," she stepped closer, studying him, "something in you doesn't fear me." Elias met her eyes. "Maybe that's why I'm still standing." For the first time in years, Soraya smiled, and it was not a friendly one. "Then you are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both." Days turned into weeks. Instead of imprisonment, Elias was kept under watch aboard Soraya's flagship, the Vengeance of Velar. She questioned him daily about humanity, their wars, their alliances, their desperate reach into the stars. Each question was sharp, deliberate, and laced with disbelief. "You build empires of dust," she told him one night, her voice almost soft. "You fight for meaning in a universe that has none." Elias leaned forward, his tone steady. "Meaning isn't given, it's made. Maybe that's why we're still here." That response unsettled her in ways she wouldn't admit. For the first time in centuries, someone had spoken to her not as an enemy, not as prey, but as an equal. Her people feared emotion, called it a disease that clouded reason. But this human, this fragile creature, spoke as though hope was a weapon. She began to see why the Galactic Council feared his kind. Humanity didn't just survive. They believed. The turning point came when a hostile fleet from the Dominion entered Valari space. Soraya's forces were unprepared. Her enemies had waited years for her attention to falter, and now they struck with merciless precision. As alarms blared and explosions rocked the hull, Elias broke free from his guarded quarters. He found Soraya in the command center, surrounded by chaos. "You should not be here," she snapped, activating defense protocols. Neither should you, he said, taking the station beside her. But if you want to survive, you'll need a Terran's instinct. Her officers balked as he began rerouting power manually, his human mind finding patterns their AI had missed. The two worked side by side, alien logic and human defiance, until the tide turned. When the last enemy ship fell silent, the command deck erupted in stunned disbelief. Soraya turned to him, chest heaving, eyes wide. You disobeyed every order I gave you. Elias smiled faintly. That's kind of a human thing. After the battle, her demeanor changed. She began to speak with him, not as a captive, but as someone she couldn't quite categorize. You saved my world, she said one evening, watching the stars burn outside the viewport, and yet your kind destroys as easily as it heals. How do you live with that duality? Elias looked at her, his voice low. Because we have to. Because choosing not to care is the only true death. She looked away, her expression unreadable. You make me question everything I've ever believed, she whispered. Then I'm doing my job, he said quietly. Over time, that fragile tension grew into something neither could deny. When she walked beside him, the air seemed charged. When he spoke, she listened not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Two beings from opposite worlds, drawn together by the one thing neither had expected, understanding. But peace never lasts in space. The Galactic Council soon discovered that Soraya had allied with a human. They called it treason. Fleets were mobilized, orders were given, and soon both their species stood on the brink of annihilation. They'll come for you, Elias said. They'll come for us both, she replied. Then let them. The battle that followed shook the stars themselves. Terran ships fought alongside Valari vessels under Soraya's command, defying both their governments in one final act of unity. When the Council demanded surrender, Soraya sent a single message that echoed through every channel. If you seek to destroy us, you will find humanity standing in your way. Her words became legend the moment an alien commander claimed humanity as her own. In the end, their alliance held, though the price was heavy. The Council fractured, the Valari retreated, and Earth's name spread across the stars not as a threat, but as a promise. Years later, in the quiet aftermath, Elias and Soraya stood on the bridge of their shared ship, watching the dawn rise over a rebuilt galaxy. They said we'd destroy each other, he murmured. Maybe we did, she replied softly, but we built something better from the ashes. He turned to her, a faint smile on his lips. For someone who didn't believe in emotion, you've changed a lot. She looked at him, her golden eyes warm. Perhaps humanity was the infection we needed. He laughed, and for the first time she did too. A sound like starlight breaking. In that laughter, the galaxy found hope again. And so it was written in the archives of the new Galactic Council, the story of the human who crossed forbidden space and the alien commander who chose to stand beside him. It was a tale of courage, defiance, and love that bridged the stars. And every generation after remembered it not as a warning, but as a promise that where humanity goes, the universe changes. The night after Elias's capture felt longer than any he'd ever known. The Valari ship drifted through the Crimson Nebula like a silent predator, its hull alive with flowing veins of light. He sat alone in a containment chamber made not of metal bars but energy walls that shimmered faintly, humming like a heartbeat. He couldn't tell if it was alive or simply technology beyond his comprehension. Hours passed, or perhaps days. The Valari didn't keep time the way humans did. They existed in rhythms and sequences, each pulse of their ships matched to the life force of their crew. When the door finally dissolved before him, Elias expected guards, maybe weapons. Instead, there was only her. Commander Soraya entered the chamber with the composure of someone who owned the very air she breathed. Her eyes glowed faint gold, their light flickering when she blinked. She moved closer, her voice smooth yet laced with quiet steel. You have been very calm, human. Most scream by now. Elias met her gaze and said simply, I don't see the point. She tilted her head, studying him as one might examine an artifact found buried in ancient dust. No point? You crossed into the most restricted space in the galaxy. You should beg for your life. Elias shrugged slightly. I've already lost it, haven't I? So I might as well find out who took it. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Curious creature. She led him through her ship's vast corridors, where the walls seemed to breathe and hum softly, alive with energy. Every Valari who passed paused and stared, their faces unreadable, their silver and crimson armor reflecting the pale light. The Valari were tall, elegant beings, their movements fluid and deliberate, their expressions carved from restraint. They lived without touch, without laughter, and above all, without chaos. Yet chaos was precisely what Elias carried in his every step. When they reached the observation deck, Soraya gestured toward the window where the nebula's red mist pulsed like the veins of a living god. Do you know what you're looking at? She asked. A pretty storm? He offered. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. This is the grave of empires. Thousands of ships, Valari, Dominion, even human relics, burned here long before your species could walk upright. This place remembers death. And still you came. Elias watched the swirling red clouds, their light reflected in his eyes. Maybe we're not afraid of ghosts. Maybe we're just tired of running from them. Her silence stretched long enough that he thought he had offended her. Then, unexpectedly, she said, Your kind fascinates me. You have no discipline, no control, yet you survive where logic says you should perish. You fight for worlds you'll never live to see. Elias smiled faintly. We call that hope. The word seemed to hang in the air, alien and uncomfortable. Hope? She repeated slowly, as though testing it. We were taught that hope is what weak species cling to when they cannot adapt. Elias chuckled softly. Then maybe that's what makes us dangerous. We don't adapt, we refuse to give up. For the first time, something shifted in her eyes. A flicker of curiosity? Or was it respect? She walked closer, her voice lower now. You speak as if your people are immortal. Not immortal, he said, meeting her gaze. Just stubborn enough to outlast extinction. Later, when he was returned to his quarters, not quite a prison, not quite freedom, Elias found himself unable to sleep. The ship's hum vibrated softly through the walls, the faint rhythm almost like a heartbeat, and he realized it wasn't the ship. It was her. Commander Soraya's energy signature was linked to every system. The entire vessel was an extension of her will. Somewhere deep down, he felt her presence, watching him, measuring him. He wondered if she thought he was brave or just foolish. Either way, she hadn't killed him, and that alone was a mystery worth unraveling. Days turned into something resembling routine. She summoned him often, not for interrogation but conversation. Her questions were sharp, precise, and often philosophical. Why do humans explore so much? She asked one evening. Your species builds, destroys, and rebuilds again. Do you never rest? Elias looked at the stars beyond the viewport. If we stop moving, we start dying. Curiosity isn't a choice. It's who we are. She studied him quietly. And what happens when curiosity leads you to ruin? He smiled faintly. Then we rebuild. That's the one thing we're good at. Soraya walked closer, the metallic sheen of her skin catching the starlight. You remind me of something we used to be, before logic stripped us clean. Maybe logic is overrated, he said softly. For a moment, she seemed to agree, but her expression hardened again. Don't mistake my interest for mercy, human. You still violated my borders. He nodded. Then why am I still breathing? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and said, Because I haven't decided what to do with you yet. As days bled into nights, their conversations deepened. She spoke of her world, Velar Prime, a planet of crystal deserts and endless storms, where children were raised without touch to prevent emotional weakness. He told her about Earth's oceans, its chaotic cities, the way people fell in love and destroyed each other in equal measure. One evening, she asked, almost too quietly, Is it true what they say? That humans die for love? Elias looked at her for a long time before answering. Yes, but we also live for it. She turned away, as though the words had cut deeper than she expected. "Foolish," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but it's what makes us human." Something in her began to change. The soldiers noticed first. They whispered when she walked past, their eyes flicking toward the human she kept alive longer than any prisoner before. Rumors spread through the fleet that the commander had gone soft, that her judgment was compromised. But Soraya ignored them. The human unsettled her, not because he was dangerous, but because he was unpredictable. He questioned everything she believed. And worst of all, he made her feel something she hadn't felt in centuries. Alive. Then came the day that shattered the uneasy calm. A warning siren filled the ship. Soraya's expression darkened. "Dominion warships," she said. "They've entered the expanse." Her crew scrambled to battle stations. Elias followed her to the bridge, ignoring her order to stay behind. Outside the viewport, enormous vessels emerged from the nebula, their black hulls pulsing with red light. The Dominion had returned, seeking revenge against the Valari after years of quiet hatred. "How many ships?" he asked. "Too many," she said, her voice sharp. "They'll break through our defenses within minutes." He stepped beside her, unarmed, uninvited. "Then let me help." She turned to him, eyes fierce. "You think I would trust a human with my fleet?" He met her glare without flinching. "You already do. You just don't want to admit it." In that moment, as Dominion fire rained against her shields, something inside her broke. "Fine," she said. "Do what you can, Captain. But if you fail, I will kill you myself." He smiled. "Fair enough." He dove into the nearest console, his fingers flying across controls that should have been alien to him, but the patterns made sense. The Valari systems ran on emotion, each command linked to intention. And humanity, he realized, was nothing if not emotional. Within minutes, he rerouted power from the lower decks, creating a feedback surge that destabilized the Dominion's targeting systems. The battle shifted. Her soldiers stared in awe as their human prisoner fought like one of them. When the final Dominion ship exploded in a cloud of light, Soraya turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You disobeyed me," she said. "I saved you," he countered. For a heartbeat, the tension between them burned like the stars outside. Then she said quietly, "You are a problem I can't solve." That night, after the battle, she found him on the observation deck. The nebula outside pulsed softly, its red glow now tinged with violet. "You fought for a people who despise you," she said. "Why?" Elias looked at her. "Because survival isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it most." Her voice softened. "You risked everything." "So did you," he said. "You could have killed me the moment I crossed that border." She held his gaze. "Maybe I should have." He took a step closer. "But you didn't." The silence that followed was heavy, alive, charged with something neither of them had words for. "Finally," she said, almost a whisper, "you're still not free." He smiled faintly. "I'm not asking to be." And somewhere deep in the silence of space, under the glow of a dead nebula, an alien commander and a human soldier began to understand the most dangerous truth in the galaxy. That sometimes, the greatest rebellion isn't against empires or gods, but against the walls we build inside ourselves. The next dawn aboard the Vengeance of Velar arrived in silence, though no natural sun touched its decks. The Valari ship drifted at the edge of the Crimson Nebula, its hull scarred from the battle, but still radiating quiet power. In the command deck's dim light, Commander Soraya stood alone before the viewport, her hands clasped behind her back. She watched the faint reflection of the man who had disobeyed her orders and saved her fleet. Humanity, she thought, was reckless in every possible way, and yet, when she replayed the moment he rerouted her ship's systems in the heat of chaos, her pulse quickened. Emotion was something her people had purged long ago, calling it a weakness. But the human had made her feel something she couldn't quantify. A strange warmth, unsettling but alive. When the door hissed open behind her, she didn't turn. "You should still be resting," she said. Elias Reeves' voice came steady, if tired. "You don't strike me as someone who rests much either." She turned then, eyes faintly glowing in the low light. Humans recover by sleeping. Valari recover by control. That is the difference between us. He smiled faintly. You make it sound like control is a cure. Maybe it's the disease. Her gaze hardened, but not with anger, more with thought. You speak like someone who believes chaos has purpose. Maybe it does, he said softly. Without it, there'd be no stars. Just darkness. She studied him for a long moment before asking, "Why did you save me, human?" Elias's reply was quiet but steady. Because it was right. She frowned. Right and wrong are illusions created by weak species to justify their instincts. He took a step closer. Then maybe that's why we're still alive. Because we still believe in illusions. Her lips curved, almost imperceptibly. You talk too much. You listen too well, he said, and for the first time she looked away. It wasn't defiance, it was discomfort. No one spoke to her like that. No one dared. And yet this human did so without hesitation, without fear. It both infuriated and intrigued her. Over the following days, an odd rhythm emerged aboard her ship. Her officers watched with suspicion as she allowed Elias limited freedom, assigning him to assist with damage control, even to advise on certain tactical systems. The Valari engineers found his methods crude, but effective, and despite themselves, they began to respect him. But whispers spread through the corridors like static. Rumors that their revered commander had grown attached to the trespasser. Valari culture valued obedience above all else, and attachment was considered a flaw. To care was to falter, to desire was to fall. And yet, even Soraya began to feel the quiet erosion of the walls she had built around her mind. One evening, after a long cycle of repairs, she found Elias in the ship's observation chamber again. He stood by the great transparent wall, looking out into the swirling red and violet mist. "You spend too much time staring into the void," she said, approaching him. "I'm trying to see what you see in it," he replied. "You call it a graveyard. I call it proof that even death leaves beauty behind." She stopped beside him, following his gaze. The nebula pulsed faintly, light bending through the dust clouds like slow thunder. "You humans always find poetry in destruction," she said. "Maybe," he murmured, "because it's the only place we've ever found meaning." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was alive. When she finally spoke, her voice had softened. "Your people fight so hard to exist. You reach for everything, even the things that hurt you." He turned toward her. "Maybe that's what keeps us human. We don't run from pain. We turn it into something worth remembering." Her golden eyes lingered on him longer than intended, and for the first time, she realized how dangerously close he was. His presence unsettled her, not as a threat, but as an equal. "You are impossible," she whispered. "And you are impossible to forget," he replied quietly. For a moment her breath caught. Then she stepped back, regaining the composure that centuries of discipline had taught her. "You speak as if you have forgotten your place, human." "Maybe I never had one," he said softly. "That's the thing about us. We find belonging where we're not supposed to." She turned sharply and walked away, her pulse racing. But even as she left, she knew something had shifted. When the next council transmission arrived, it was worse than she had feared. The Galactic Council had learned of the human prisoner aboard her ship. They demanded his immediate execution for trespassing into restricted space and violating interstellar law. The message ended with a single cold line: "Failure to comply will be considered treason." Soraya stood before the transmission's fading light, her jaw clenched, her mind racing. Her duty was clear. Her heart, if she dared call it that, was not. Hours later, she found herself in her private chamber, staring at the faint outline of Earth's star maps that Elias had shown her earlier. The blue sphere, so small and fragile among the stars, lingered in her thoughts. She activated her calm. "Bring the human to me," she ordered. Elias entered quietly, sensing the change in her tone. "You got the message," he said. "They want me dead." "They want order," she corrected. And you are disorder. He nodded. So what will you do? She turned away from him, her hands trembling slightly, something she hadn't experienced in decades. If I obey, I remain loyal. If I disobey, I lose everything I have built. He studied her quietly. And what do you want? Her silence lasted long enough to fill the room. Then she whispered, I don't know anymore. Elias took a step forward. Then maybe that's your answer. Maybe for once you don't need to know. Her eyes flicked toward him, full of something fragile and dangerous all at once. You would destroy me, she said softly. No, he replied. I'd remind you you're alive. Outside, the stars shifted as her ship began to move, slowly, deliberately, toward the border of Valari space. Where are we going? Elias asked. Soraya's voice was quiet but resolute. Somewhere the council won't find us. That's a big galaxy, he said. Then we'll use all of it. For the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. Not the cold, practiced expression of command, but something real. And in that moment, Elias realized something unspoken. The galaxy's most feared commander wasn't rescuing him out of mercy or rebellion. She was doing it because, for the first time in her long, ordered existence, she wanted to choose something for herself. But choices have consequences. As the vengeance of Velar vanished into the nebula, the Council's fleet began to move. Entire systems stirred as news of her defection spread. She had broken the oldest law of the Valari to feel, to care, to love, and for that, there would be no forgiveness. Yet she didn't look back. Beside her on the bridge, the human who had once been her prisoner stood now as something else. An equal, a partner, a symbol of everything she had been forbidden to be. They'll come for us, he said quietly. They already have, she replied. But for once, I don't care. The crimson nebula pulsed around them like a living storm as the ship disappeared into the stars, leaving behind the old world of control and fear. Somewhere deep in the heart of space, far from the reach of law or empire, began a story no one had ever told before. The story of a human who crossed a forbidden border, and the alien commander who broke every law of her kind for him. And as they sailed into the unknown, the stars seemed to burn brighter, as if the universe itself was watching two lost souls defy it all. The pursuit began almost instantly. As soon as Commander Soraya's flagship, the Vengeance of Velar, vanished into the mist of the Crimson Expanse, the Galactic Council declared her a traitor. The Valari High Command, once her most loyal supporters, broadcast a single decree across the entire sector. Find her. Destroy her ship. Erase the human. Armadas moved like shadows across the star lanes, their engines burning with purpose. The hunt for the iron flame of Velar had begun. But deep within the nebula's heart, Soraya and Elias had already gone far beyond the reach of any known chart. Her ship drifted through the storm's electric red clouds, its systems camouflaged by distortions in the magnetic fields. The crew, what remained of them, was loyal only to her. They had chosen exile over obedience, though none dared question why their commander would risk everything for one human trespasser. On the bridge, silence ruled, except for the low hum of the engines and the steady rhythm of Soraya's breath as she stared into the swirling lights ahead. Elias stood beside her, his reflection caught in the glass. They'll come for you, he said quietly. They already have, she replied. But they won't find what they're expecting. She had changed in ways even she could barely comprehend. The rigid commander who once obeyed logic above all else now navigated by something far more dangerous. Instinct. The human had infected her thoughts like a quiet flame. She told herself it was strategy, that keeping him alive served some purpose, but she knew it wasn't true. The truth was simpler and far harder to face. He made her remember what it was like to feel alive. You're too quiet, she said suddenly, glancing at him. For someone who's made me defy an empire, you speak very little. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just enjoying the view. She arched a silver brow. The nebula or the chaos you caused? Both, he admitted. One's beautiful, the other's terrifying. I've never been good at telling them apart. She almost smiled, but the sound of a distant alarm silenced it. Her officer turned sharply. "Commander, we've been detected. Tracking signals behind us." Her gaze hardened. "They found us faster than expected." "How many ships?" Elias asked. "Enough," she replied coldly. "Enough to remind me that running was never my specialty." Within moments, the stars behind them ignited with streaks of blue and gold, Valari pursuit ships cutting through the nebula like blades. "They're broadcasting on all channels," said her communications officer. Soraya's jaw tightened. "Patch it through." The voice that filled the bridge was cold, metallic, and full of judgment. "Commander Soraya of the Valari fleet, you stand accused of treason, of harboring an enemy species, and of corrupting the purity of Valari law. You are ordered to surrender the human and your vessel. Do so, and we may yet show mercy." Soraya's golden eyes darkened. "Mercy?" she repeated softly. "They use that word like a weapon." Elias stepped forward. "What are you going to do?" She looked at him, her voice steady but her pulse quick. "Exactly what they taught me. Fight until they remember who I am." The battle erupted like a storm tearing open the heavens. The nebula lit up with the clash of energy bolts and plasma trails. Soraya's ship moved like a living creature, its hull shifting and reforming as she willed it. Every system was linked to her thoughts, every weapon an extension of her will. "They're closing in," shouted her first officer. "Hold formation," she commanded. "Let them think we're retreating." Elias stood beside her console, scanning the enemy's formation. "They're tightening their arc. If they get behind us, we're finished." She shot him a sharp glance. "Do you have a better idea, human?" He pointed to the tactical display. "Yes, the magnetic fields in this sector, if you overload them, you can destabilize their sensors. They'll lose tracking for seconds. It's enough to flip your ship and strike from behind." Her brows furrowed. "That maneuver will destroy the lower decks." "Then we don't have a choice," he said. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other. Two commanders, one bound by logic, the other by instinct. Then she nodded. "Do it." The ship trembled as energy surged through its veins. The nebula's crimson clouds twisted violently, lightning flashing through the void. The Valari pursuers fired blindly, their targeting systems collapsing in a wave of static. Soraya's eyes glowed brighter, her hands gripping the control sphere. "Now," she whispered. The vengeance of Velar spun sharply, flipping its axis in a burst of light. Its rear cannons fired in unison, cutting through the enemy's formation. One by one, the pursuing ships exploded, their flames scattering like dying suns. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the low hum of the ship remained. The bridge crew stared in awe. Elias exhaled slowly. "Remind me never to underestimate you again." Soraya turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Good. I'd hate to disappoint." But victory came at a cost. The ship's power was unstable, its core pulsing erratically. "Commander," her engineer warned, "we've lost half our energy reserves. Shields are down to minimal levels." Soraya's jaw tightened. "Then we disappear." She activated the cloaking matrix, but the effort drained more energy than expected. The lights dimmed across the ship. Elias steadied himself against the console. "How long can you keep this up?" "Long enough," she said quietly, though her voice lacked certainty. "There's a system nearby, a dead world orbiting a white dwarf. We can hide there." He nodded. "And then what?" She looked at him, her voice almost a whisper. "Then we wait to see who finds us first, the Council or fate." They reached the dead world hours later. It was a barren, silent sphere, its surface littered with the wreckage of forgotten wars. The ship landed in the shadow of a mountain of twisted metal. The crew began repairs, though exhaustion weighed on every face. Elias and Soraya stood alone on the surface, the stars above reflected in her eyes. The air shimmered faintly from the planet's radiation, painting their figures in pale blue light. "You could still turn me in," he said quietly. "Save yourself." Her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "Do you think I would have risked everything just to surrender you now?" "I don't know," he said softly. "You don't exactly do this for people like me." She turned to him then, and for the first time he saw no trace of the commander, only the woman beneath. "You are not like them," she said. "When you speak, you make me question the silence I built my life on. When you look at me, I remember that I am not a machine." He stepped closer. "Then don't go back to being one." The space between them felt electric, alive with all the things neither dared say. "This is madness," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but maybe madness is what makes us human." Her breath caught, and for a long moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, she reached up, her hand brushing against his cheek. The contact was brief but powerful, two worlds colliding in the smallest act of defiance. "Elias," she said, her voice trembling in a way that frightened her. "If we do this, there's no going back." He met her gaze. "I crossed your border once. I can cross this one too." The stars above burned brighter, and for that single moment, the galaxy felt infinite. But even in that stillness, a shadow stirred. High above the planet, a fleet of Council drones had begun to triangulate the faint trace of her ship's energy signature. War was coming again, whether they wanted it or not. But this time, Soraya wasn't fighting for her empire, her rank, or even her people. She was fighting for something far rarer: choice. The choice to love, to defy, to live not as a soldier but as herself. And when Elias looked at her, standing beneath the light of a dying star, he understood that whatever happened next, humanity had already changed her, and through her, the galaxy would never be the same again. The warning came too late. As dawn rose over the dead world, a faint pulse echoed through the ship's scanners. Rhythmic, deliberate, not natural. The crew froze. Soraya and Elias were in the command bay when the readings came through. A sensor officer's voice cracked as he whispered, "They found us." Outside, the sky began to flicker with streaks of blue light. Council ships dropping from hyperspace in formation. Dozens, then hundreds. Soraya's golden eyes hardened as the air trembled from the arrival shockwaves. "They sent a full fleet," she murmured, her voice sharp with fury and disbelief. "For one human and one fallen commander." Elias looked at the display, his jaw tightening. "They're not here to arrest you," he said quietly. "They're here to erase you." She gave a bitter smile. "Then they'll have to earn it." The ship's alarms blared as she took command. Her crew, loyal to her, bound to her defiance, moved like extensions of her will. "Power the weapons grid," she ordered. "Bring every defense online. I want full visibility on their formation." Elias moved to her side without hesitation. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a wall of Council warships surrounding them, each one burning with cold blue light. "We can't outrun them," he said, his voice calm but his pulse racing. "Then we don't run," she replied. "We make them remember why they once feared my name." The crew fell silent. Even now, even facing annihilation, her presence filled the bridge with unshakable strength. The first salvo struck like thunder. Plasma fire ripped across the sky, turning the horizon into a wall of light. The vengeance of Velar shuddered, its shields flaring under the assault. "Return fire," Soraya commanded. The ship answered her voice like it was alive, releasing bolts of searing light that tore into the Council's front line. Several enemy vessels erupted in flame, but for each one destroyed, 10 more advanced. "They're closing in on all sides," shouted her second officer. "Hold the line," Soraya said. "Every second we stand is another second they'll remember." Elias looked at her, his voice steady despite the chaos. "You can't win this fight. Winning isn't the point," she said coldly. "Surviving long enough to be remembered is." The ship rocked again, alarms screaming. Fires broke out across the lower decks. The crew scrambled to contain the damage. Soraya gripped the console, her voice low. "They'll breach us soon." Elias stepped forward. "There's still a chance. The magnetic storm's outside. If we overload the reactor and vent the plasma through the hull, it'll blind their sensors for a few minutes. We can escape in the chaos." She turned toward him sharply. "That would destroy the ship." Then we survive without it, he said. It's the only way. Her gaze softened for the briefest moment. You'd sacrifice everything to save me? No, he said quietly. I'd sacrifice everything because you showed me something worth saving. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she nodded once, her eyes burning with both fury and resolve. Do it. He ran to the engineering bay, the corridors shaking around him as explosions tore through the ship. The lights flickered. Sparks rained from broken conduits. Soraya's voice echoed through the intercom, calm even in the storm. To all crew, this is your commander. You have served with honor. Whatever happens next, know this: your loyalty has given meaning to my name, and that will never die. Elias reached the core chamber, the heart of the ship glowing like a dying star. He activated the overload sequence. The hum deepened to a roar as energy built within the walls. It's ready, he shouted into his comm. Now, Soraya. The ship erupted in light. A shock wave rippled outward, tearing through the council formation. Dozens of ships were thrown off course, their targeting arrays blinded by the magnetic surge. In that instant of confusion, Soraya activated the emergency drives. The Vengeance lurched forward, engines howling, as it burst through the storm like a wounded beast refusing to die. The air around them burned red and white as the planet's surface fractured beneath the pressure. We're breaking atmosphere, yelled her helmsman. Soraya's voice cut through the chaos. Brace for jump. Then, with a deafening crack, the ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only the burning wreckage of what had once been their prison. Silence returned. The stars stretched out again as the ship drifted through the aftermath of the jump. The lights flickered weakly. Much of the hull was gone, and half the systems were offline. The crew worked quietly, faces pale from exhaustion and shock. Soraya sat in the captain's chair, her armor cracked, her hands still shaking from the surge. Elias approached slowly, the smell of smoke clinging to his uniform. We made it, he said softly. She didn't answer at first, her eyes distant, fixed on the stars. They'll come again, she murmured. They won't stop until we're both dust. He nodded. Then we'll give them something to chase. Hours passed before the adrenaline faded. In the silence that followed, the two of them stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Her reflection shimmered faintly beside his. Do you regret it? She asked at last. Crossing into my space, defying your own people? Elias shook his head. Not once. Even now, she pressed. Even knowing that we've doomed ourselves? He turned toward her. You call it doom. I call it freedom. She exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh. Humans, she said softly, always chasing light, even when it burns you. And Valari, he replied gently, always afraid to touch it. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, nothing else existed. No ships, no council, no war. Just two souls standing against the universe itself. But fate wasn't done with them. Days later, as the damaged ship drifted through the outer rim of the galaxy, a strange signal appeared on their scanners. It was faint, but rhythmic, a pulse unlike any known frequency. Soraya frowned. It's not council, she said, and it's not dominion. It's something else. Elias studied the display, his brow furrowed. It's coming from inside the expanse. No one has ever survived the inner rings of that storm, she said. Then maybe it's time someone tried. He looked at her, and despite everything, the danger, the exhaustion, the endless running, he smiled. We've come this far. Let's find out what's waiting for us. Soraya stared at him for a long time before finally nodding. Very well, human. But whatever we find, there's no turning back. He met her gaze, his voice steady. There never was. She turned to her crew. Prepare the ship for descent. As they entered the storm, lightning crawled across the hull like living fire. The nebulous crimson light deepened until it became almost alive, wrapping around the ship in spiraling patterns. Do you feel that? Elias whispered. It's like it's watching us. Soraya's voice dropped to a whisper. No, she said. It's remembering us. And as the ship descended deeper into the expanse, through a sea of red storms and ancient silence, Soraya realized what she had become. No longer a commander of the Valari, no longer bound by duty or fear. She was something new. The last light of a dying empire, reborn in defiance, guided by a human's stubborn heart. And as Elias stood beside her, the stars around them began to move, as if bowing to something greater. Whatever waited in the heart of that storm, it would find them together. And this time, it wouldn't be humanity seeking forgiveness or Valari seeking order. It would be something entirely different, the beginning of a legend whispered across the stars, of the human who crossed forbidden space, and the alien commander who chose him over her empire. And in that moment, beneath the flickering glow of dying starlight, Soraya looked at Elias and said softly, "You were right." "About what?" he asked. She turned toward him, her voice a quiet flame. "Hope isn't a weakness. It's the only thing that survives the dark." The heart of the crimson expanse swallowed them whole. For days, or what felt like days. There was no time, no direction, only endless red light flickering through the storm. The ship drifted through currents of magnetic fire that sang across the hull, lighting up the decks with a faint ghostly glow. The crew moved like shadows, their exhaustion evident, their loyalty unbroken. Soraya sat in the captain's chair, her armor cracked, her skin pale from sleepless nights. Across from her stood Elias, his face marked with soot and determination. Every system on the ship groaned under the strain, yet neither of them spoke of stopping. There was something inside the storm, something calling to them both, a rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat within the static. "We're getting closer," Elias said quietly. "Whatever's in there, it's alive." Soraya didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the main viewport, where the nebula's red haze began to split open, revealing something vast and impossible. Before them floated a structure, ancient, colossal, and glowing faintly with golden veins of light. It wasn't Valari. It wasn't human. It was older than both civilizations combined. The readings spiked wildly as they approached. "That's not a ship," whispered one of her officers. "It's a construct, maybe a relic." Soraya's voice was low but steady. "No, it's a tomb." The closer they came, the clearer it became. A massive ring of fractured stone and alloy, orbiting a dead star at its center. Thousands of smaller vessels, long abandoned, floated like dust around it. Elias stared, awe and dread mixing in his voice. "What is this place?" Soraya stepped forward. "The first war. The place where the Valari were born from the ashes of another species. The Council erased it from the archive centuries ago. They wanted us to forget." He turned to her. "Why?" Her golden eyes shimmered faintly. "Because this is where we learned to fear emotion, where love once destroyed an empire." Her words hung heavy in the air as the ship moved into the shadow of the ring. "There's something inside," Elias said. "Power readings are off the charts." Soraya hesitated. "If the Council finds out we've come here, they'll erase this system entirely." "Then we make sure they don't," he said. She almost smiled. Always so human, always turning disaster into purpose. "It's what we do best." He grinned, but she didn't return it. Her gaze lingered on the glowing heart of the construct. "I wasn't supposed to end here," she murmured. "None of this was supposed to happen." "Maybe it always was," he said softly. "Maybe the universe wanted someone to remember." They docked within the ring's outer corridor. The interior was silent. No sound, no movement, only the distant echo of something vast and ancient humming beneath the metal floor. The walls shimmered with strange patterns that reacted faintly to their touch, like light breathing against skin. Soraya led the way, her fingers trailing across the glowing surface. "This structure recognizes me," she whispered. "Valari DNA. We were built from this." Elias followed, scanning the patterns. "You mean your people didn't evolve?" "We were made," she said quietly. "Born from design, not nature. The Council calls it creation. I call it imprisonment." They reached a chamber that opened into a vast space filled with floating pillars of light. In the center was a throne, massive, alien, and alive with energy. "This is it," Soraya said. "The core of the first mind. It was said to hold the thoughts of the species that created us." Elias stepped closer, but the light flared suddenly, blinding him. When he could see again, Soraya was no longer beside him. She stood before the throne, her body illuminated by tendrils of golden light. "Soraya!" he shouted, running forward, but the energy surged, holding him back. Her voice echoed through the chamber, distant and ethereal. "It's showing me everything, my people, our purpose, the truth the council buried." He strained against the light. "You have to let go." "No," she whispered. "Don't you see? This was the real reason they wanted to keep me from crossing the border. They knew I'd find this place. They knew I'd remember." Her voice grew stronger, filled with both awe and pain. "Elias, they erased our history to hide their shame. The Valari weren't born to rule, they were made to serve. We were weapons, and the ones who created us were human." The words froze him. The light pulsed wildly, shaking the chamber. "That's impossible," he shouted. "Humanity didn't even have spaceflight back then." "Not your humanity," she said, her voice trembling. "An older branch, a forgotten age. The first explorers who reached the stars and became gods. They built us, then destroyed themselves." The energy surged higher, surrounding her completely. "It's calling me to finish what they began." "Soraya, stop!" he pleaded, stepping forward through the heat. "You're not them. You're better than them." She looked at him through the blaze, her eyes filled with both sorrow and understanding. "You changed me, Elias. You showed me what it means to feel. Maybe that's why it chose me." The light began to twist around her body like fire. "Soraya, if you do this, you'll die." "No," she said softly. "I'll become what I was meant to be." The chamber erupted in light so intense it silenced everything. The ship outside trembled as energy waves rippled through the nebula. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. Elias stumbled forward, the floor cooling beneath his boots. The throne was gone. So was she. In her place stood a single sphere of golden light, pulsing like a heartbeat. He reached out and touched it, and her voice filled his mind, gentle, clear, eternal. "I am not gone. I am the bridge now between what was and what will be. Go, human. Tell them what we forgot, that emotion is not weakness. It is creation itself." Tears burned his eyes as the sphere rose into the air, drifting toward the roof. It passed through the metal like mist, rising into the storm above. Outside, the nebula flared brighter than it ever had before, its crimson light turning to gold. The vengeance of Velar lifted off, its systems restored by an unseen force. The crew watched in awe as the storm parted, revealing a sky full of stars they had never seen before. Humanity and Valari had both been born from chaos, but now they shared a legacy of something greater, understanding. Elias sat in the captain's chair, the gold light still faint on his hands. He looked out into the endless horizon of space. "You kept your promise," he whispered. "You made them remember." The stars shimmered as if in response. He knew she was still there, somewhere in the vast web of light that bound the galaxy together, watching, protecting, waiting. And so, the legend began, the tale of the human who crossed forbidden space and the alien commander who defied her creators. Their story spread across the stars, whispered by travelers, written into archives, and remembered in song. It became a warning, a promise, and a hope that no matter how far humanity fell or how high the Valari rose, the universe would never again forget what emotion could create. If you enjoyed this HFY sci-fi story about humanity, courage, and the bond that changed the galaxy, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Tales. More stories await, of humans who challenge the stars, of hearts that outshine empires, and of the endless truth that humanity endures.